There has always been an unspoken rule in our family. Lorraine does everything right and I do everything wrong. Once upon a time, I tried to challenge this, but over time, I just accepted it as a given, like accepting the weather or the color of my eyes. My name is Yvette Dawson. I'm 30 years old, and according to my family, I'm a perpetual disappointment. Today, I stood at the window of my apartment in Aurora, watching the fall rain turn the streets into mirrors. The phone in my hand still showed the last message from my mom. Tomorrow at 11. Don't be late, as usual. I sent you the attorney's office address in the mail. Grandpa Irwin had died 3 days ago. I still couldn't believe it. 78 years old isn't a long time by today's standards, especially for a man who, at his age, could walk up to the fourth floor without shortness of breath and beat me at chess 3 games in a row. I put the phone away and went to my closet. What to wear to the reading of the will? A black dress? Too funeral? Pantsuit? Too formal? In the end, I chose a navy blue skirt and beige blouse, an outfit my mother would call understated, and Lorraine would simply ignore as something unworthy of comment. Thinking about my sister caused a familiar knot in my stomach. Lorraine, 3 years older than me, successful corporate lawyer, married to up-and-coming financial analyst Edward, two perfect twin daughters, a house in an upscale neighborhood. Classic success story. She even looks like the cover of a magazine, always impeccably styled blonde hair, slim figure, elegant manicure. I'm the complete opposite. Curly dark hair that has a life of its own. Working as an environmental assessment specialist in construction. Not that my parents would consider it serious. You're just checking paperwork, my mom once said. She never realized that my job helps build buildings that don't poison the soil and air. But to her, anything that doesn't bring in six-figure sums is unworthy of attention. I remember the day I decided to pursue this specialty. I was 15, and my grandfather took me to the construction site of his last project before retirement. He was an old-school civil engineer, a man who believed that houses should last for centuries. See that excavation, Evie? He asked, using his nickname for me. Underneath it is groundwater that feeds half the gardens in the neighborhood. If we make a mistake with the waterproofing or use the wrong materials, it'll be an ecological disaster in 5 years. I remember standing at the edge of a huge hole, and my grandfather explaining the principles of safe construction to me while the workers nodded respectfully. I realized that day that I wanted to do something like that, build something durable and safe. When I announced my choice at the family dinner table, my mother pursed her lips, my father stared at the newspaper, and Lorraine, who was already out of law school, smiled indulgently. Well, someone has to fill out those boring forms. Only Grandpa put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Well done, Evie. Environmentalism isn't just a buzzword these days, it's a matter of survival." After that dinner, our meetings with Grandpa became a regular occurrence. Every Sunday, I visited him at his small but cozy house on the outskirts of Aurora. We would drink tea, play chess, and he would tell me stories from his youth about building bridges and skyscrapers. Sometimes we would just sit in his garden, watching the birds. He never demanded that I be different, never compared me to Lorraine. To him, I was just Evie, his granddaughter who found bird nests and knew how to listen. The last time I saw him was 2 weeks ago. He looked tired, but his eyes still sparkled as he talked about a new book on architecture he'd recently bought. "Evie," he said to me then, "remember that building I told you about? The one I designed in the 80s? "Sure, Grandpa. That office center with the courtyard garden? Yeah, that's right. I want you to go there sometime. See for yourself. There's something there you'll like." I promised I would, but I never got around to it. A phone call from my father changed everything. Grandpa's dead. Heart attack, funeral's Wednesday. At the funeral, Lorraine gave an impeccable eulogy about an outstanding engineer and loving grandfather. My mother wept quietly, leaning on my father's arm, and I stood aside, unable to utter a word. My grief was too personal, too deep to share with people who had never really known Grandpa Irwin the way I knew him. After the funeral, Lorraine approached me with her trademark expression of polite engagement. "Are you holding up?" she asked, fixing my perfect hair. "Yes," I answered briefly. "Mom says you've been visiting your grandfather a lot these past few years. Every Sunday." "That's how?" She looked surprised. I didn't know. Did he talked about us? Sometimes. I didn't mention that Grandpa rarely mentioned the rest of the family. Not because he didn't like them, but because our time was just our time. No comparisons, no expectations, no disappointments. I spent the evening before the reading of the will going through the photos. Here's my grandfather teaching me to fish. I'm 9 and proudly holding my first catch. Here we are at an exhibition of modern architecture. I'm 15, and I'm staring open-mouthed at models of buildings of the future. Here's last year's Christmas, the last one we celebrated together. In this picture, he's laughing, holding a gift I made him, a wooden chessboard that I burned and varnished myself. The phone rang with a new message. From my mother. I hope you remember that tomorrow is a big day. Please dress appropriately. I didn't bother answering. I put the phone screen down and went back to the photos. I had once tried to explain to my parents why spending time with my grandfather was so important to me. My mother only shrugged. He's always been weird, and he spoils you. In her mouth, weird sounded like a judgment. But for me, Grandpa's weirdness was his strength. He saw the world differently than everyone else. He saw beauty in old buildings, in birds' nests, in quiet mornings. And he saw something special in me, something my parents, who were always comparing me to Lorraine, never saw. I often wondered why my mother was so cold to her own father. One day I plucked up the courage to ask my grandfather about it. Everyone has their own way, Evie, he answered after a long pause. Your mother chose hers. I chose mine. Not all roads cross as often as we'd like. That diplomatic answer didn't explain anything to me, but I never brought it up again. Now, going through the photos, I regretted it. So many questions left unanswered. I wondered what would be in the will. I'd never thought about it before. Grandpa lived modestly, though comfortably. His house, a few stocks, maybe some savings. I didn't expect much, and frankly, I didn't care. No inheritance could replace our Sunday chess games and long conversations about the future of sustainable cities. The last photo in the stack was taken recently. My grandfather and I in his garden, among the blooming roses. He looks pensive, almost sad. It seems to me now that he had a premonition of something even then. I miss you, Grandpa, I whispered, putting the pictures back in the box. Tomorrow would be a hard day. The day I would gather with my family for the last time for the man who was the only one who truly understood me. A day when I will have to face their expectations, disappointments, and comparisons again. I went to bed with a heavy heart, but a strange sense of foreboding. Grandpa always said that life is full of unexpected twists and turns. You never know, Evie, what view will open up around the next bend in the road, he liked to say. Tomorrow I'll find out what view he left for me. The office of Hodges and Associates looked exactly as I'd expected. Muted colors, expensive dark wood furniture, and an air of understated importance. I arrived 10 minutes early, surprising my parents, who were already sitting in the reception area with Lorraine and her husband Edward. Yvette, my mother nodded at me, scrutinizing my outfit. Her eyes flashed with the usual disappointment, but she didn't say anything. Perhaps even she realized that today was not the time to comment on my not representative enough clothes. My father, engrossed in his tablet, nodded slightly, not looking away from the screen. Lorraine came up and hugged me, the perfect gesture for the sisterly intimacy we played out in public. I'm glad you could make it, she said in that tone one uses with distant acquaintances. As if I couldn't, I replied quietly. Edward, in an immaculate gray suit, shook my hand with the professional smile of a financial analyst. I'm sorry for your loss. He said a phrase that sounded like he'd rehearsed it. I barely had time to thank him when the office door opened and an older man with a neat gray beard and shrewd blue eyes stepped out. The Dawson family? Please come in. My name is Graham Hodges, and I've been Mr. Irwin Dawson's personal attorney for the past 35 years. We followed him into a spacious office with a huge oval desk. The panoramic windows overlooked the business center of Aurora, but today the cityscape was blurred by a fine autumn rain. Please have a seat. Hodges indicated the chairs around the table and took a seat at the head. He opened a leather folder and pulled out several documents. Before we begin, let me again express my deepest condolences. Irwin was not only a client of mine, but a good friend. His passing is a great loss to all of us. The mother nodded demurely. The father murmured words of thanks. Lorraine looked collected and focused, as if in an important business negotiation. I stared at the lawyer in silence, trying to figure out if he was really Grandpa's friend. Why then had I never heard of him? Grandpa had never mentioned Graham Hodges in our conversations. I'm going to read Irwin Dawson's will, made and signed by him in his right mind and good conscience, Hodges began in a formal tone, putting on his thin-rimmed glasses. I, Irwin James Dawson, being of sound mind and sound judgment, do hereby make my last will and testament. The lawyer read the standard legal wording, and I stared out the window at the rain, feeling strangely alienated from what was happening. Grandpa hated formalities. He always said that legal language was invented to hide simple truths behind complicated words. It was hard for me to imagine him drafting this document full of cumbersome phrases. To my son, Richard Dawson, and his wife, Eleanor Dawson, I leave my home in Aurora at 28 Maple Street, with all furnishings and art, and the sum of money in the amount of $2 million. I noticed my mother tense slightly and my father frown. Grandpa's house was modest by our family's standards, and the amount obviously didn't meet their expectations. To my granddaughter, Lorraine Carmichael née Dawson, I leave my collection of antique books on architecture and engineering, my shares in Blue Ridge Construction and Aurora Development, and the cash sum of $4.5 million. I felt a wave of surprise pass through the room. Lorraine sat with her back straight, but there was a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. Edward put his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of congratulations. Hodges continued to read. The total cash inheritance is $6.5 million. I took a deep breath, preparing to hear that my grandfather had left me an old chess set or fishing tackle. Something personal that only had value to the two of us. And it would have been the right thing to do. Our relationship was never built on money or material possessions. But instead, Hodges simply closed the folder and looked at the audience over his glasses. Is that it? Father asked with ill-concealed displeasure. What about Yvette? Hodges looked at me nonchalantly, then back at Dad. There are no other instructions in the main body of the will. Mother turned to me with an expression that was a mixture of gloating and ostentatious regret. Well, Yvette, now you see where your unconventional behavior leads. Your grandfather always valued success and achievement. She glanced at Lorraine. Apparently, he chose to reward those who truly deserved it. I remained silent, feeling a lump grow in my throat. Not because of my lack of inheritance, no, I'd never counted on money. It was her words. Did she really know her own father so poorly? Grandpa never measured people by their bank account or status. Dad coughed and looked at me with contrived sympathy. Yvette, perhaps it's even for the best. Go earn your own money. Being on your own builds character. I felt a hot blush of shame and anger flood my cheeks. Not at the words themselves. I'd long been used to such lessons from my parents. It was the fact that they could say such things here and now, turning my grandfather's memory into another reason to humiliate me. Lorraine looked slightly embarrassed but didn't say a word in my defense. Edward was scrutinizing the pattern on his tie, pretending not to be involved in the family scene. I was about to get up and leave when Graham Hodges suddenly raised his hand in a stopping gesture. Let me be clear, he said slowly and firmly. I said that there are no other instructions in the main body of the will. There is, however, a private addition to it, which I am obliged to read now. Everyone froze. Hodges took out a sealed envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. Irwin Dawson left special instructions regarding this addendum. It was to be read only after the main will had been read, and only in the presence of the entire family. He carefully opened the envelope and extracted from it a sheet of paper. I, Irwin James Dawson, hereby declare that in addition to the property and funds distributed in the main body of my will, I am the founder and owner of a controlling interest in Green Innovation Technologies, registered in the state of Delaware under the number 89773225. A surprised whisper ran through the room. I noticed my father straighten abruptly, and Lorraine exchanged a quick glance with Edward. Green Innovation Technologies specializes in the development and production of sustainable building materials and technologies for smart buildings. At the time of this addition to the will, The company's market value is estimated at $43 million, with annual profits of $8 million. My mother made a strange sound, something between a sigh and a groan. My father's face slowly poured red. I am transferring my controlling interest of 65% of the stock to my granddaughter Yvette Dawson. The remaining 35% of the stock is held by minority shareholders and management. I chose Yvette as the heir to Green Innovation Technologies, not only because of our special relationship, but also because her professional expertise and values are fully aligned with the company's mission to create a green future through innovation in construction. I sat stunned by these words. Grandpa, my humble grandfather with his small house and old car, was the owner of a multi-million-dollar technology company. And he had left it to me? It seemed unreal, like a dream or a sci-fi movie. I deliberately did not mention the existence of this company in conversations with my family, except to my friend and attorney Graham Hodges. This was out of a desire to protect my life's work from those who might see it only as a source of income rather than a means to create a better, cleaner world for future generations. Hodges paused for a moment, glancing at my parents before continuing. Attached to this addendum are all the necessary legal documents to prove ownership and how the assets will be transferred. Graham Hodges is authorized to assist Yvette in the process of inheriting and further managing the company, if she so desires. The lawyer finished reading and put the sheet back on the table. There was silence, broken only by the sound of the rain outside the window and my father's heavy breathing. Then my mother stood up abruptly, her face contorted with rage. "This is a forgery!" she shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She manipulated the old man, exploited his weakness and gullibility. My father would never have done such a thing, to give away an entire company to her. To her!" She said the last word as contemptuously as if she were talking about something disgusting. "Eleanor, calm down," said Hodges firmly. The addendum to the will was drawn up in full compliance with the law, signed by Irwin in the presence of 2 witnesses, notarized and registered. You have no grounds for accusations of forgery. Then it's influence, undue influence, the mother kept screaming. She had been creeping into his confidence for years, feigning interest in his boring stories and projects. It was all for money. I finally found my voice. "Mom, I didn't even know this company existed until today." "Liar!" She turned to Lorraine. Tell her it's not fair. You're the one who really deserves." Lorraine suddenly interrupted her, raising her hand in a conciliatory gesture. "Mom, please, let's not make a scene. Mr. Hodges is right. If the papers are in order, we have no grounds for complaint." She turned to the lawyer. "May I see those documents?" Hodges nodded. "Of course, Ms. Carmichael. I have copies prepared for each member of the family." He pulled several folders out of his briefcase and handed them out to those present. While everyone studied the documents, I sat there unable to open my folder. My hands were shaking and 1,000 questions were running through my mind. Why had Grandpa kept the existence of the company from me? Why had he chosen me over Lorraine, with her law degree and business acumen? What would I do with a multi-million-dollar business I knew nothing about? My father was the first to break the silence, slamming the folder shut. "Graham, this is absurd. Yvette has no idea how to run a business of that size. She works as a small clerk for a construction company." "I'm an environmental scientist," I corrected him automatically. "It doesn't matter," he said. "The point is that this decision doesn't make good business sense. My daughter will ruin the company within a year." Hodges looked at him with unperturbed calm. "Mr. Dawson, your father was an exceptionally reasonable man. He started this company from scratch 15 years ago and turned it into a market leader in green building technology. Believe me, he carefully considered his decision." My mother was still seething with rage, but now her anger took a colder form. "You," she pointed at me. "You've always been his favorite. Always. Ever since you were a child. He spoiled you, indulged your fantasies of saving the planet, and now you've gotten what's coming to you." "Happy?" I wanted to answer, but my throat was tight with resentment and shock. Lorraine suddenly intervened. "Mom, let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe grandfather meant, Shut up," said her mother. "You're good too. You were always too busy with your career and children to visit him. And Yvette, she looked at me with disgust. She found time, didn't she? She found the time to get into her confidence and steal from the whole family. Mrs. Dawson! Hodges's voice became harsh. I will not allow you to hurl such accusations. Irwin was my friend, and I personally watched him make that decision. It was deliberate and reflected his true intentions. The mother opened her mouth to reply, but Hodges raised her hand. Besides, your daughter received the controlling interest perfectly legally. If you continue with these accusations, I will be forced to advise Ms. Dawson to file a libel suit against you. This finally silenced the mother. She sank back in her chair, trembling with rage. Her father put his hand on her shoulder, but she dropped it sharply. We'll contest the will, he said, looking at Hodges, on every possible ground. The lawyer shrugged. That's your right, Mr. Dawson. But I must warn you that the chances of success are very slim. All the documents are flawless. Edward, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. Perhaps we should discuss this in a quieter setting. I suggest we all take a time out and meet, say tomorrow. Lorraine supported her husband immediately. Edward is right. Everyone is too excited right now. Hodges nodded. A reasonable suggestion. He turned to me. Ms. Dawson, I'd like to go over some details of the inheritance process with you separately. Perhaps at the same time tomorrow? I nodded, still not trusting my voice. Mother stood up abruptly, and without a word, headed for the exit. My father followed, glaring at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Lorraine paused for a moment. Yvette, we need to talk. Alone. Not now, Lorraine, I said. Please. She pursed her lips but nodded, taking Edward's arm and walking out of the office. I was alone with Graham Hodges and the echo of my mother's screams still ringing in my ears. The rain had intensified by the time I left Hodges's office. Drops drummed on the roof of my old Toyota, as if trying to reach my numb mind. I sat behind the wheel without turning on the engine and tried to make sense of what had happened. $6.5 million for my parents and Lorraine. A multi-million-dollar company for me. The screams from my mother. My father's cold fury. And this private addition to a will no one knew about. The phone in my bag vibrated, revealing an incoming call from Lorraine. I dropped the call. Then it rang again. Mother. I turned the phone off completely, unable to talk to either of them right now. I got home in a fog, unable to remember the details of the trip. Back at the apartment, making tea and wrapping myself in a blanket, I finally opened the file Hodges had handed me. Lines of legal text danced before my eyes, merging into an indecipherable stream of terms and numbers. Controlling interest. 65%. 43 million. 8 million in annual profits. It was too much to realize at once. I closed the folder and leaned back on the couch. Thoughts of Grandpa came flooding back. Why didn't he ever tell me about the company? We had talked so often about his past projects, about my work, about the future of green building. How could he hide from me that he had created an entire company dedicated to just that? I fell asleep right on the couch, exhausted by emotions and unanswered questions. In the morning, I was awakened by the doorbell, insistent, demanding. I struggled to get up, feeling shattered after a restless sleep. Richard stood on the doorstep, my father in an impeccable business suit despite the day off. We need to talk, he said, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Good morning, Dad. I reached up to smooth my hair, feeling unkempt in my crumpled clothes from last night. My father looked critically at my modest living room, with its shabby couch and bookshelves instead of expensive furniture. Do you really think you can handle running a company? He asked without preamble. You have neither the experience nor the education for it. You'll ruin your grandfather's life's work within a year. It wasn't so much the rudeness that struck me as the complete lack of congratulations, or at least surprise. Not a word about the fact that his father had built a successful business. Only accusations and doubts about my abilities. I didn't ask for this company, I replied, trying to speak calmly. It was Grandpa's decision, not mine. Exactly, my father raised his voice. The decision of an old man, who in the last years of his life was clearly not distinguished by his common sense. Who in their right mind would give a multi-million-dollar business to a man with no idea how to run it? I felt a wave of anger rising inside. Grandpa was sane until the last day. You just don't want to admit that he made a conscious choice. Not in your favor. My father's gone black. You don't know what you're talking about. A company of this size is not a charitable foundation that can be used to fulfill your green fantasies. This is a serious business that requires strategy, market understanding, and financial planning. Green Innovation Technologies is in the business of green technology, I reminded him. Maybe that's why Grandpa chose me. Because I share his values and not just want to make a profit? Dad snorted. Values don't pay the bills, Yvette, and they won't save the employees' jobs when the company starts losing money under your leadership. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. What do you want, Dad? Sell the stock, he answered without hesitation. Sell the controlling interest to us, me, Mom, and Lorraine. We'll give you a good price, well above market value. You'll get more money than you can spend in a lifetime, and you'll be relieved of a responsibility you obviously can't handle. I stared at my father, trying to see something in him other than cold calculation. Somewhere deep inside, I wanted to see a glimmer of concern, even a hint that he cared about me, not just the money. But his eyes remained hard, assessing. I need time, I said finally. I won't decide anything until I've met with Hodges and learned more about the company. Don't be silly, Yvette. His voice hardened. You know you can't do this anyway. Why are you stalling? It's not your decision. I was surprised at the firmness of my voice. Grandfather entrusted the company to me, and I want to understand why before I give it up. Dad shook his head. You've always been stubborn. That's what will ruin the company if you don't come to your senses. He headed for the door, but stopped on the threshold. Think about the offer. It won't last forever. When the door closed behind him, I sank exhaustedly onto the couch. It was only 9 in the morning, and I was already feeling emotionally drained. I still had 2 hours before my meeting with Hodges. I decided to take a shower and clean myself up. Under the warm water, my thoughts began to clear. What would Grandpa say in this situation? He always taught me not to make hasty decisions, especially under pressure. Get all the facts first, Evie, then think about them, and only then decide. When I got out of the shower, I found 5 more missed calls, 3 from my mother, and 2 from Lorraine. There was also a message from Edward. We're offering a constructive discussion. Call me when you're ready. Constructive discussion, in their mind, probably meant another attempt to convince me to sell the stock. I turned my phone off again and began to get ready for my meeting with Hodges. The lawyer's office was quiet and empty, a day off. Hodges met me in the same office where the family drama had played out yesterday, but the atmosphere was completely different today, calm and businesslike. Ms. Dawson, he rose to meet me. Thank you for coming. How are you feeling after last night? Confused, I admitted honestly. And a little depressed. My father had already come by with a buyout offer. Hodges nodded as if he'd expected that. I'm not surprised. Please have a seat. We have a lot of important matters to discuss. I sat down in the chair across from him, noticing several folders and a sealed envelope on the table. Before we get to the business part, Hodges began, I have something to tell you. Your grandfather left a personal letter for you, which he asked me to deliver after the reading of the will. He handed me an envelope. You might want to read it in private. I took the envelope with trembling hands. It was written in my grandfather's handwriting, simply, Evie. I can leave you alone for a few minutes, the lawyer suggested. Yes, please, I nodded. When the door closed behind Hodges, I carefully opened the envelope and unfolded a few pages in the familiar, angular handwriting. Dear Evie, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm no longer around, and you just found out about my last surprise for you. I'm sorry for keeping green invention a secret all these years. I had my reasons, and now I want to explain them. 15 years ago, when I officially retired, I had an idea. I saw how the world of construction was changing, how new materials and technology could make buildings not only strong, but also friendly to the environment. I decided to invest my savings and knowledge in creating a company that would develop such technologies. I started modestly, a small laboratory, a few talented engineers, and my first patents. I didn't tell my family because I wanted to make sure the idea was viable first. But as the company grew, I began to realize another reason for my silence. Your father, my son, had always looked at business solely through the lens of profit. To him, a successful enterprise is one that generates maximum revenue at the lowest cost. That's not a bad approach, but he never shared my vision that businesses can and should benefit the world, not just make money for the owners. I may have disappointed you by not sharing more about the company in our conversations, but I have watched you, your growth, your choice of profession. I saw how sincerely you cared about the future of our planet, how seriously you took your work in environmental due diligence. You didn't just say the right words, you lived up to your convictions. 3 years ago, I made the decision to make you the heir to Green Inquiry. Not for sentimental reasons, but because I saw you as someone who could carry on my business in the spirit in which it was conceived. There's something else you should know. Your mother, my daughter, has always treated me with a coldness that you have no doubt noticed. There was a serious conflict between us many years ago when I refused to finance her wedding to your father on the scale she wanted. I saw Richard as a man too focused on material possessions and feared that their marriage would be based on mutual gain rather than love. I was right, but my daughter has never forgiven me for not supporting her choice unconditionally. Things deteriorated further when you and your sister were born. Eleanor and Richard decided that Lorraine should get the best of everything: prestigious schools, extra classes, connections in the right circles. They were preparing her for a successful life by their standards. It was as if you were sidelined, especially when it became clear that your interests and values were different from their ideas of success. I tried to intervene, but my attempts only exacerbated the conflict. In the end, I decided it was better to support you directly, not through them. Our Sunday meetings were the brightest moments of the week for me. Evie, I know that the news of the company and my decision will cause an uproar in the family. Your parents and probably Lorraine will try to convince you to give up or split the inheritance. They'll say you can't handle it, that you'll ruin the company, that I made the decision in senile dementia. Don't believe them. You are stronger and more capable than they will ever let you think you are. Green Innovation has talented people dedicated to our mission. They will help you settle in and learn everything you need to know. Graham Hodges, whom I trust unconditionally, will also be there to support and advise you. The decision, of course, is yours. If you feel the burden is too heavy, you are free to renounce the inheritance. But before you make that decision, give yourself time to get to know the company, to understand its mission and potential. I believe you'll make the right decision, not for me, but for yourself. Evie, you've always been my true heir, not by blood but by spirit. I see in you the same passion for creation, the same desire to make the world a better place, that has driven me all my life. If anyone is capable of taking green innovation further, it's you. With love and faith in you, your Grandpa Irwin. I finished the letter with tears rolling down my cheeks. Grandpa's voice seemed to resound in my ears. His words were exactly as he would have said in his lifetime. His faith in me, his explanation of his motives, his candor about family conflicts. It was all so similar to our conversations, and yet contained so much that was new. My mother's conflict with my grandfather over her wedding. My parents' conscious decision to focus on Lorraine's success at my expense. I'd always felt it intuitively, but I'd never heard anyone admit it out loud. A knock on the door brought me back to reality. Hodges peered into the office. "May I come in?" I nodded, hastily wiping away my tears. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "It was very personal." "I understand," the lawyer said softly, sitting down across from me. "Your grandfather was a wonderful man, wise, far-sighted, and very caring, especially when it came to you." "Were you aware of the conflicts in our family?" I asked bluntly. Hodges nodded. "Irwin trusted me not only as a lawyer but as a friend. He often talked about you, about his disappointment in the way your parents treated you, about his hope to give you a chance to prove yourself." "And my mother?" "It wasn't just a wedding," Hodges answered after a pause. "Your mother and father wanted Irwin to finance not only the ceremony, but also your father's first business. Irwin refused because he thought the idea of the business was dubious and your father's motives self-serving. He was right. That business went bankrupt after 2 years, but your mother never forgave him for not trusting her choice." I shook my head, trying to make sense of the new information. "And the company?" How had grandfather managed to hide its existence for so many years? Hodges smiled. Irwin was not only a brilliant engineer but also a prudent man. He had registered the company through trustees, conducted business discreetly. Official documents listed him as a technical consultant, not the owner. Only in this addendum to the will did he reveal his true role. And the company is really worth 43 million? Actually, after the latest valuation, it's closer to 50, Hodges replied. Green innovation is growing faster than projections suggested. The latest development, a smart energy-saving system for residential homes, has won several prestigious awards and major orders. I sat stunned by the magnitude of what Grandpa had created in secret from all of us. Mr. Hodges, I have no idea how to run a company like this, I finally admitted. My father was right. I could ruin it. I beg to differ, the lawyer said gently. Irwin has created a very effective management system. The company is run by a team of professionals, each of whom is an expert in his field. You don't have to go into all the technical or financial details. Your role as a majority owner is to set the strategic direction, support the mission and values of the company. We talked for another 2 hours. Hodges patiently explained the structure of the company, familiarized me with the financial reports, told me about key developments and future plans. The more I learned, the clearer I realized why Grandpa had chosen me. Green innovation wasn't just a business, it was the realization of his dream of a greener future for construction, the same dream we discussed at our Sunday meetings. Mr. Hodges, what if my parents try to contest the will? I finally asked. They've already started, he answered calmly. Your father contacted my office this morning and stated his intention to file a lawsuit challenging the addition to the will on the grounds of undue influence. Do they really think I manipulated Grandpa? I felt the resentment building again. They're just looking for any way they can get control of the company, Hodges answered bluntly. But they don't stand a chance. All the documents are in order, and witnesses will testify that Irwin was in his right mind when he made the addendum. Plus, there's a videotape of the signing of the documents, where your grandfather clearly states his motives. I breathed a sigh of relief, but there was still a heavy feeling inside that my own family was willing to sue me for money. Yvette, Hodges called me by my first name for the first time. I know this is a very difficult situation. Family conflicts are always painful, especially when inheritances are involved. But let me give you some advice, not as a lawyer, but as someone who knew and respected your grandfather. Don't rush into decisions. Give yourself time to get to know the company, the people who work there, and then decide what's more important to you: peace in the family, or the opportunity to continue the business to which your grandfather devoted the last years of his life. I nodded, feeling grateful for his understanding and support. Thank you. I'll do that. When I returned home, I found Eleanor, my mother, at my door. She looked as perfect as ever, but her eyes were as cold as ice. You're finally back, she said instead of greeting me. We need to talk. I opened the door silently, letting her into the apartment. My mother walked inside, looking around critically, but this time refraining from commenting on my humble abode. Have you met Hodges? She asked bluntly. Yes, I answered, not offering any details. What did you decide? I haven't decided anything yet, Mom. I need time. She turned to me abruptly. Time? For what? To turn even more against her own family? Her voice shook with ill-contained anger. Do you even realize what you're doing? You're destroying our family. Me? I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't ask for this inheritance. It was my grandfather's decision. Your grandfather was a stubborn, selfish man who always did everything out of spite, she blurted out. He never approved of my marriage, never supported me, and now he's used his will to break us up for good. I stared at her, stunned by her words. The image of my grandfather, a gentle, wise man who never spoke ill of anyone who hurt him, did not fit that description. You didn't know him at all, I said quietly. Grandpa wasn't vindictive or mean. He just wanted his business to go on as he intended. And he thought you, with no education, no experience, would do a better job than Lorraine, than your father and me? It's absurd, Yvette, and you know it. It's not about management experience. I objected. Grandfather created the company to develop environmentally friendly technologies for construction. It coincides with my interests in education. Your interests? My mother snorted contemptuously. Your green ideas are just a fashion fad. A company of this size requires a serious business approach. I felt determination growing inside. I won't sell the stock, Mom. At least not right now. I want to learn more about the company first, to understand what it does and how it works. Her mother turned pale with anger. So you're choosing money over family, instead of us? I'm not choosing anything, I exclaimed. I just want time to sort things out. There is no time, Yvette. Her voice became hard. Either you sell the shares to us now at a fair price or you can forget about having a family. I stared at her, not believing my ears. You're, threatening to disown me? Because of the money? Not because of the money, but because of your betrayal, she cut me off. You've always sided with your grandfather against us. You always thought you were special, different. Well, now you've got what you wanted. You're special, you've got company. But you don't have a family anymore if you don't come to your senses. She headed for the door, but stopped on the threshold. You have 3 days, Yvette. Either you accept our offer, or you can forget about being a Dawson. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room, stunned by her words. My own mother had just given me an ultimatum, money or family, as if it was impossible to keep both. I sank down on the couch, feeling strangely numb. Just 3 days ago, I had a normal life, a job, a modest apartment, rare but important meetings with my grandfather, strained but still existing relationships with my parents and sister. And now everything has turned upside down. My grandfather was gone. I was suddenly the owner of a multi-million-dollar company, and my own mother was threatening to disown me if I didn't sell the stock. The last lines of Grandpa's letter echoed in my head. You were always my true heiress, not by blood, but by spirit. He believed in me more than I ever believed in myself. And now I was faced with the choice of honoring his trust or keeping the peace in a family that, as it turned out, valued me far less than potential millions. I pulled out my phone and turned it on for the first time all day. The flood of notifications came down instantly. Dozens of missed calls, texts, emails. Ignoring most of them, I found Hodges's contact and typed in a message. My mother just gave me an ultimatum. Either I sell the stock to the family or they disown me. I have 3 days to decide. The reply came almost instantly. This is a common pressure tactic. Don't make any hasty decisions. I'll arrange for you to meet with the management of Green Innovation tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Get to know the company before you decide its fate. I sent a short thank you and put the phone away. Tomorrow I'll learn more about Grandpa's legacy, about the company he created in secret from all of us. And maybe then I'll be able to figure out what to do next. Give in to family pressure or find the strength to follow the path my grandfather showed me, even if that path leads to a permanent break with my parents. The Green Innovation Technologies building was not the massive glass skyscraper I had expected, but an elegant 4-story structure on the edge of Aurora's business district. The facade was partially covered with vertical gardens, and the roof was occupied by solar panels. The company was clearly embodying its values in its own office. I was greeted in the spacious lobby by Hodges, looking less formal today in a navy blue sweater instead of his usual suit. Ready to learn about your grandfather's legacy? He asked with a slight smile. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and anxiety. I hadn't slept much during the night, thinking about my mother's ultimatum and trying to make sense of my own feelings. What did this company mean to me? What would I have done if it weren't for family pressure? Hodges escorted me to a conference room on the top floor, where 5 people were already gathered, 3 men and 2 women, all dressed casually but neatly. Let me introduce the key executives of the company, Hodges began. Marcus Bennett, CTO, Alicia Ramirez, Chief Financial Officer, Winston Taylor, Director of Research and Development, Fiona Norris, Director of Marketing, and Trevor Parks, Chief Operating Officer. They all took turns shaking my hand, smiling welcomingly. I expected to see wariness or skepticism in their gazes. After all, I was an unknown heiress, dropped on them out of the blue. But instead, I felt genuine warmth and relief. Relief? It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Ms. Dawson, said Marcus Bennett. a tall man with a gray streak in his dark hair. "Irwin's told us a lot about you." Had he? I was surprised. But I didn't even know the company existed until the day before yesterday. Bennett exchanged glances with his coworkers. Irwin was cautious about family matters, but he often said his granddaughter shared his vision for the future of green building. The next 2 hours flew by. The executives took turns talking about different aspects of the company, from innovative materials that absorb carbon dioxide to smart energy saving systems that can reduce building energy consumption by 30%. I listened and asked questions, and with each passing minute, I could see my grandfather's handwriting in everything from technical solutions to corporate culture. This was truly his company, the embodiment of his values and vision. After the presentations, Hodges offered to show me Grandpa's office. We went up to a small mezzanine above the main floor. "Irwin came here 3 or 4 times a week," the lawyer explained, opening the door. "Officially, he was listed as a consultant, but everyone knew who really made the key decisions. The office was an exact replica of his home office. The same wood paneling, bookshelves filled with specialized literature, even an old-fashioned desk lamp with a green shade. In the corner stood a familiar chess set on a carved table. He said he thinks best when he's playing with himself," Hodges said, following my gaze. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "Can I look around here by myself?" "Sure." Hodges headed for the door. "I'll meet you in the conference room when you're ready." When the door closed, I walked slowly around the office, touching the items that surrounded Grandpa on a daily basis. There were neatly folded folders on the desk, and there was a picture, me in my graduation robe after graduation. There were no other family photos. I opened the top drawer of the desk and found a leather-bound day planner. The last entry was dated the day my grandfather died. "Meeting with R&A at 1400. Discuss proposal." R&E, Richard and Eleanor? My parents met with my grandfather the day he died? Why hadn't they said anything about it? I continued flipping through the day planner in reverse order and found a few more entries about meetings with my parents over the past few months. Each time after these meetings, Grandpa made short notes. Refused. Same offer again. Insist. In the bottom drawer of my desk, I found a folder labeled Family Matters. Inside were documents dated from different years, dating back to the founding of the company. I started reading and felt the ground go from under my feet. The first document was a letter from my father, dated 13 years ago. In it, Richard Dawson expressed extreme disappointment at his father-in-law's decision to hide the company from the family and demanded that he and Eleanor be included on the board of directors and that they be given a share of the stock. Next came an official letter from the law firm representing my parents, threatening legal action if their demands were not met. Next came a series of documents related to my father's attempts to obtain information about the financial condition of the company through various channels, including unethical ones. And most shocking of all, a letter from Lorraine dated 5 years earlier. My sister, then a practicing attorney, was representing a client in a case against Green Invention over a disputed patent. In the letter, she coldly informed my grandfather of the pending litigation without even mentioning her relationship to the company's owner. I sat stunned by these revelations. My parents didn't just know about Grandpa's company, they'd been trying for years to gain control of it. And Lorraine was involved in a lawsuit against her own grandfather. The door opened quietly, and Hodges peeked into the office. "Is everything all right?" he asked, noticing the look on my face. "Did you know?" I picked up the folder. "Did you know that my parents knew about the company all along?" Hodges sighed and walked into the office, closing the door. "Yes, they found out about Green Innovation about 2 years after it was founded. Someone in your father's business acquaintance had mentioned a promising new company and its founder, Irwin Dawson. And they've been trying to get control of the company ever since?" I still couldn't believe it. First, they just demanded an explanation as to why Irwin had hidden the existence of the business from them. Then they started pushing for stock transfers or at least board seats. When Irwin refused, the relationship finally soured. And Lorraine? Was she really representing a client against her grandfather? Hodges nodded. That had been the turning point. Irwin was deeply hurt that his own granddaughter had turned against his company, even though she knew it was his brainchild. We won that trial, but it was the final straw in the relationship with your sister. Why didn't Grandpa ever tell me about this? He wanted to protect you from family conflict, Hodges said softly. And, admittedly, he was afraid that if you knew the truth, it might ruin your relationship with your parents and sister. He valued your Sunday meetings and didn't want to cloud them with heavy talk of family strife. I looked at the last entry in my day planner. They had met with him the day he died. My parents. Why? Hodges gloomed. Irvin called me right after that meeting. He was very upset. Your parents had somehow found out about his intention to give you controlling interest and had come with an ultimatum. Either he would change his will in Lorraine's favor, or they would tell you the whole story of the standoff and, in their words, shatter your illusions of a loving grandfather. I felt everything inside clench with pain and anger. Were they blackmailing him? His own father? I'm afraid so. Irwin refused to give in to the blackmail and said that if they decided to tell you the truth, he would be only too glad. He said you deserved to know why he decided to leave the company to you. Tears welled up in my eyes. A few hours after that meeting, he had a heart attack. Yes, Hodges confirmed quietly. The doctors said it could have been caused by extreme stress. I closed the folder and stood up resolutely. I want to talk to someone who knew Grandpa from the very beginning, from the founding of the company. Someone who can tell me the whole story, not just the business aspects. Hodges thought for a moment. There is one person, Norman Prescott. He was Irwin's partner in the early stages, helping with financing and connections. They were close friends even before the company was founded. Norman is now retired, but we keep in touch. Is it possible to meet him? Tonight? I'll call and find out. Hodges nodded. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the cozy living room of Norman Prescott's country house. A trim 70-year-old man with lively eyes and a warm smile that reminded me so much of my grandfather's. I've finally met the famous Evie, he said, pouring tea. Irwin couldn't talk about you without his eyes glowing with pride. Were you two close? I asked, accepting the cup. Over 40 years of friendship, Norman nodded. We met while building a bridge in Seattle. I was a young financier. He was a talented engineer. Our paths haven't diverged since. Did you help him start Green Invention? Not only did I help him, I talked him into it. Norman smiled. Irwin had a brilliant idea for a new composite material that absorbs carbon dioxide from the air. I saw great potential in it and suggested that he not just patent the technology, but start a company. And he agreed to keep it from his family? Norman darkened a little. At first, no. He wanted to share his success with his daughter and son-in-law, but then he fell silent, as if searching for words. Let's just say he had reasons to change his mind. What reasons? Norman sighed. Evie, your grandfather loved you very much and wanted to keep you out of family squabbles. I'm not sure I should. Please, I interrupted. I found the papers. I know that my parents tried to take control of the company, that Lorraine went up against my grandfather in court. I need to know the whole truth. Norman looked at me carefully, then nodded. Okay. When we first started out, Irwin happened to mention the company at a family dinner. His son-in-law, your father, was immediately interested and offered to help run it. Irwin politely declined, explaining that he wanted to get the business on its feet first. Norman paused, sipping his tea. The next day, your father came to the office with a ready-made contract that required Irwin to give him 40% of the stock and the CEO seat in exchange for his business connections. Irwin refused again, and that's when the trouble. What kind of trouble? Richard started spreading rumors to potential investors about the company's instability, used his connections to obstruct permits and licenses, and when that didn't work, he brought in his daughter Lorraine, who was already working in a law firm. My sister knowingly turned against my grandfather? I still couldn't believe it. She was representing a client who was trying to challenge one of our key patents, Norman answered. Technically, she hadn't violated anything, but she knew exactly whose business she was trying to undermine. I shook my head, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. And my mother? What role did she play in all this? Norman was silent for a moment, as if deciding how frank to be. Eleanor. She'd always had a difficult relationship with Irwin, even before you were born. She was jealous of his success, his ability to accomplish things. Jealous of her own father? It's not as unusual as it may seem, Norman said softly. Eleanor grew up in the shadow of her famous father. Everyone was always comparing her to him, and she always felt she was falling short. When she married Richard, she hoped he would help her prove her worth. And when Irwin started a successful company and didn't offer them a share, it was taken as further confirmation that he didn't believe in their abilities. Is that why they're so insistent on controlling the company now? To prove something? In part, yes. But there's a more prosaic reason: money. Green innovation is worth tens of millions and still growing. For people who have always measured success by financial metrics, it's too tempting a prize to pass up. We talked for another 2 hours. Norman told me about the early days of the company, about the challenges they faced, about the principles his grandfather had laid out for the business: sustainability, innovation, long-term thinking instead of chasing short-term profits. Irwin always said he was building the company for the future, Norman said as he walked me out. A future where his granddaughter Evie could breathe clean air and live in harmony with nature. He believed in you, even when you were still a child. I hugged this warm man, feeling I had found another connection with my grandfather. Thank you for telling me all this. Irwin would want you to know the truth, Norman replied. And remember, whatever you decide to do with the company is your decision. Don't let anyone manipulate you, not even your family. On the drive home, I reflected on everything I had heard. The picture that was forming was much darker than I could have imagined. My parents didn't just know about the company, they were actively trying to take it away from my grandfather. Lorraine hadn't just gotten the bulk of the inheritance, she'd deliberately acted against my grandfather's interests. And I believed all along that we just weren't a very close family, that my parents just didn't understand my interests. By the time I got to my house, it was already dark. Lorraine was sitting on the doorstep, elegant even in simple jeans and a sweater. She stood up when she saw me. "We need to talk, Yvette. A serious talk." I looked at the sister I'd always thought was just more successful, more in line with my parents' expectations. Now I saw before me a person who had deliberately betrayed her own grandfather for career ambitions. "Yes," I said, opening the door. "We really need to talk. About a lot of things." When Lorraine entered my apartment, I felt strangely calm. Just yesterday, I would have been nervous, feeling like the little sister who always had to prove something. Today, I looked at her with new eyes. "Tea?" I asked, turning on the kettle. "No, thank you." Lorraine remained standing in the middle of the room. "I don't have much time. I came because the situation is getting out of hand." "Which is what?" "This confrontation, Yvette." She ran a hand through her hair, a rare gesture of nervousness in the always collected Lorraine. "Mom's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Father's talking about lawsuits. It's all abnormal." I waited in silence, pouring tea for myself. "Listen." She finally sat down on the edge of the couch. "I know Grandpa loved you, and you have every right to his inheritance. But think realistically. Can you really run a company of this size?" "I was at Green Innovation today," I answered calmly. "I met the management. I looked around the office, found some interesting documents in my grandfather's desk." Lorraine tensed. "What kind of documents?" "About how you represented a client against Grandpa's company, knowing it was his business." Something akin to shame flashed across her face, but was quickly replaced by a familiar confidence. "It was a professional choice. I couldn't turn down a client because of a personal connection. You could have referred the case to another lawyer, but you chose to go after your own grandfather. That was 5 years ago." There was a bit of irritation in her voice. "And we lost that trial, so no harm was done to the company." "It's not about the outcome of the trial, Lorraine. It's about your choices, like our parents' choice to blackmail Grandpa into changing his will." Lorraine straightened up, her eyes narrowed. "There's a lot you don't know, Yvette. Grandfather wasn't so blameless. He always put his ambitions before his family." "I met Norman Prescott," I said quietly. "He told me what it was really like. How the father had tried to seize control of the company from the beginning. How Mother was always jealous of Grandfather's success." Lorraine stood up, her face pale. Prescott had always been loyal only to his grandfather, not his family. And you? To whom are you devoted, Lorraine? She did not answer at once, and in that pause I saw the answer clearer than in any words. I've come to propose a compromise, she said at last. You keep 20% of the stock and sell the rest to us. You get a seat on the board of directors. Everyone stays where they are, and the family isn't destroyed. Family? I chuckled bitterly. The same family where my mother threatens to disown me if I don't give them the money? Where my father tries to convince me I'm too stupid to make my own decisions? Where you turn against your own grandfather for the sake of your career? Lorraine sighed. Life is more complicated than you realize, Yvette. Sometimes you have to compromise. Compromise, yes. Betrayal, no. Is that your last word? Her voice has grown cold. You're choosing company over family? No, Lorraine. I'm choosing me, my values, my path, what I believe in. After my sister left, I sat in silence for a long time. The 3 days my mother had given me to make a decision expired tomorrow. They were waiting for my surrender, believing that family pressure would break me, as it always did. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew what I had to do. Hodges's office greeted me with silence and calm. The lawyer listened intently to my account of my meeting with Lorraine. And what decision did you make? He asked me when I had finished. I will not sell the stock, I answered firmly. Grandfather had entrusted me with the company for a reason. He saw me as the successor to his business, his vision. I can't betray that trust. Hodges nodded with a slight smile. Irwin would be glad to hear that. I need your help, I continued. How to take over the inheritance, how to familiarize myself with all aspects of the business, how to work with the team. I know next to nothing about running a company, but I'm willing to learn. The Green Innovation Team will support you, assured Hodges. Marcus Bennett has already suggested a series of meetings to bring you up to speed, and I'm always available to help with legal matters. What about my parents' threats to contest the will? They filed suit yesterday, Hodges said calmly. We were prepared for that. There's no chance of them winning, but it could take a while. And their ultimatum to disown me? Hodges paused, then said softly, Yvette, sometimes family isn't about the people we share blood with, but about the people who share our values and support us. Your grandfather understood that. At noon, I parked in front of my parents' house. I was greeted by 3 tense faces. My mother, father, and Lorraine sat in the living room as if in an emergency family council. I've come to announce my decision, I said without preamble. I will not sell Green Invention stock. Not now, not in the future. My mother turned pale. My father clenched his fists. You're choosing money over family? Mother sneered. No, Mother. I choose respect for grandfather's memory over blackmail. I choose loyalty to his values over betrayal. I choose his faith in me instead of your constant questioning of my abilities. You're going to regret this, Father said quietly. You have no idea what you're messing with. I know you've been trying to take the company away from Grandpa since the beginning. That Mom was always jealous of his success. That Lorraine went up against him in court. They exchanged quick glances, and I realized I'd hit the mark. If you want to disown me, that's your right. But I'm not selling the company. I turned to leave, but my mother called out to me. Do you think you can manage without us? Without the family? I turned around in the doorway. Grandpa created a whole company in secret from you and made it a success. I think I can handle it. The next weeks flew by in a whirlwind of meetings, learning and discovery. I immersed myself in my work, learning every aspect of green innovation. The team was supportive, helping me to settle into my new role. The parents, as promised, filed a lawsuit challenging the will. Lorraine avoided direct contact with me, communicating only through lawyers. My mother made good on her threat to formally declare that she no longer considered me her daughter. Strangely, this formal loss of family brought me not pain, but release. It was as if the heavy burden I had carried my whole life trying to live up to their expectations suddenly disappeared. At the end of my first month at the helm of the company, we launched a new project, a line of carbon dioxide absorbing building materials, a dream my grandfather had never realized in his lifetime. I called it Irwin's Legacy. On the day of the project's unveiling, I stood on stage in front of journalists and partners, feeling strangely calm. In the front row sat Hodges and Norman Prescott, smiling at me encouragingly. The Green Invention team lined up next to me, not just colleagues, but people who had become something like a new family over time. Green innovation was founded with the belief that construction can heal the planet, not destroy it, I said into the microphone. Today we take another step on that path. I looked at the empty seats in the back row reserved for my family, who, as I expected, had not come. But instead of the usual pain of rejection, I felt only a quiet confidence that I had made the right choice. Grandpa had always said, "The road everyone else takes doesn't necessarily lead where you need to go." Now I understood what he meant. Sometimes you have to find the courage to go your own way, even if it means going it alone. Only I wasn't alone anymore. I had a company that embodied my grandfather and I's values. There was a team that believed in the same things I believed in. There were Hodges and Norman, connecting me to the past and helping me build the future. I had my own road, and I was ready to walk it with my head held high.